That is the conversation that our character is having in the movie is a conversation that me and the people I work with do have, which is, you know, how, although the public clearly has an appetite for garbage, how much of that garbage should you provide them with, and how much should you try to insert maybe something that is maybe a little bit above garbage?
Is this working?
Hey everyone, welcome to Ajay Discusses Movies, a show in which I discuss movies both old and new. Happy to come back after a 2-week hiatus to discuss a film that is a blast from the past. I am discussing a film that is a little over a decade old, but I still think it has some cultural pertinence to it because of the fact that it is close to the July 4th weekend. I did watch a new movie this past weekend, and that movie was titled Supergirl, but I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was really bad, horrible, not just horrible, but just forgettable. And I just didn't want to discuss it for the podcast because if I discussed it, then my criticism might bleed into an audience that may only enjoy the criticism or find interest in the criticism rooted in the fact that the main character is a woman. And as evidenced by the recent Maggie Gyllenhaal movie, I don't want to get that those commenters on my videos. I just don't. I just find it just disgusting, honestly. So I'm refraining from discussing Supergirl because the less that's said about that movie, the better it is. It's a really bad movie. Would not suggest you guys check it out. But this film does have some overlap with that of, say, Supergirl. Not only because the actor that's in Supergirl also has a role within this movie, but because both films in the last 10 minutes of the movie both feature covers of iconic songs in their own respective movies. As evidenced by the title, the movie that we're discussing today is The Interview, directed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. So I decided to discuss this movie because I thought it was a good reminder of where we are as Americans and the importance of fighting against dictatorships and fascist governments, and I felt like it was a good reminder to discuss it for this week. Now, the film stars Seth Rogen as Aaron Rappaport, as well as James Franco as Dave Skylark, as they both run the show Skylark Tonight. It is a popular show that details celebrity gossip and innuendo, very much TMZ style, where, out of the blue, Kim Jong-un says that he's a fan. The supreme leader of North Korea says he's a fan of the show. And he wants to do a sit-down interview with Dave Skylark. However, that all changes when the head of the CIA, played by Lizzy Caplan, instructs Dave Skylark and Aaron Rappaport to kill the supreme leader of North Korea, and the film is essentially the trials, the tribulations, the twists, and the turns that go with trying to assassinate Kim Jong-un. It is a satirical, dark comedy, and it really lives up to each and every one of those words. Now, in terms of my thoughts on this movie, I love this movie. It's amazing. It is exactly what it is. It is a satirical, dark comedy that makes fun of American culture just as much as, say, government in general. And when you watch this movie, it's very easy to sort of brush it aside and think, oh, it's a lowbrow Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg movie that takes its influence on its sleeve through their work with Judd Apatow before this movie. It's very easy to look at it in 2026 eyes and think of that. But back in 2014, it was anything but the case, right? When you think about the press that this movie got during this time period, right? I was in high school when this movie came out. there was a lot of press about this movie. And part of the reason as to why it did not get and the main reason as to why it didn't get a full-on theatrical release is because there were the Sony hacks.
Bowing to threats of potential violence at movie theaters, Sony Pictures Entertainment pulled the plug. In a statement, Sony said, "We have decided not to move forward with the planned December 25th theatrical release." Sony said it made that decision with paramount interest in the safety of employees and theatergoers. Korea, an online threat Tuesday, warned moviegoers to stay away, saying the world will be full of fear. Remember the 11th of September. The warning seemed to come from hackers calling themselves Guardians of Peace. That's the same group behind a wide-ranging cyber attack on Sony.
All of this is happening. Again, the movie's made, they're trying to release it, and the Sony hacks happen. And as a result, several emails are shown, not just in terms of the actor salaries of both James Franco and Seth Rogen, but also in terms of the direction that Sony was trying to go for during this time. They were thinking about sharing Spider-Man with the MCU, as well as shooting down several films that had its ties to Angelina Jolie and Rooney Mara and stuff like that. So it was a really crazy time when this movie was first released. But this movie then gets put on VOD. The studio doesn't really have that much faith in the movie as much as they should, because it is a satirical dark comedy that really relates to everybody, regardless of your political aisle, regardless of how you identify as. It's a movie that I think people can sort of enjoy for what it is, which is a dumb, schlocky comedy movie. So it gets released on VOD, and it is one of the highest, most streamed movies at that time. And I think sort of setting up the environment in which this movie takes place in and sort of had to succeed in and go through under pressure with is important when it comes to actually discussing the movie itself. So I enjoy this movie. It's fun, it's schlocky, it's dumb, and it's very easy to pinpoint certain parts of it where it does falter. Again, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch, but it is a movie that I think has a lot of replay value, and despite it being 12 years after its original release, you're still able to watch it and still find fun and enjoyment within it. So, obviously, there are issues with the movie. We'll get into the issues, but it is a fun movie. So, the movie starts out with the M&M gay scene. And obviously, I'm not going to spend the entire review discussing each scene by scene and doing a full-on discussion about it and, the metaphors that go along with it, because the movie's not trying to be that. It's just trying to be as funny as possible. So the Eminem gay scene happens, and if you need more information, Eminem sits down with Dave Skylark and admits he's gay, and it's one of the funniest scenes you'll ever see in cinema. It is absolutely hysterical, and when you see Seth Rogen as Aaron Rappaport saying to his associate that, "Hey, Eminem just came out gay 3 separate times. This is crazy. It's blowing up on gay Twitter." You have no other choice but to laugh. It is great. But again, it shows you the situation that Dave Skylark is put in, right? He's a man that is interested in the superficialness of American celebrity culture. His questions are often dumb and vacuous and quite vapid at times. And the fact that Dave Skylark's show is popular with Kim Jong-un in this particular instance is not that much of a shock. So that scene happens. It's hilarious. And when you watch this movie, it's an hour and 52 minutes. At times, it is a little bit bloated, and you can definitely tell that they were trying to pad it with as many jokes as possible. When you watch this movie, this wouldn't be the first Seth Rogen and James Franco movie. Obviously, they don't work anymore because of obvious reasons that we will not really discuss on this channel, because obviously it's not that necessary. But this wasn't the first time in which we saw these two collab. We've seen them on Freaks and Geeks, but we also seen them in Pineapple Express, and This Is the End.
Danny, we're not on acid. We didn't suck each other's dicks.
James Franco didn't suck any dick last night.
Now I know you all are tripping.
And when we watch those two movies, as well as with the interview, what it really goes to show you is that they wear their Judd Apatow influence on their sleeve. There was a quote, or a tweet, in fact, that I think still rings true to this day, and I remember reading it thinking, damn, it's hilarious, and it's quite true. I wish I could give it credit, but the tweet, and I'm butchering the tweet, so I'm going to say it off the top of my dome and see if it relates. You'll see the tweet on the bottom of the screen. But it's basically about, there are movies that you think Judd Apatow directed that he straight up did not. And I include this film as well as Pineapple Express and This Is the End as films that you think Judd Apatow directed, but he straight up did not, as well as Superbad. And I think that this is one of those films in which you watch and then you think, oh, this is a film that they filmed. They said, okay, here's the script, but the script is not the be-all, end-all. It is a template for what we can do. Film as many takes as possible, make it as funny as possible. If we need to stat pad the movie, we'll stat pad the movie. We'll increase the runtime of the movie if we have to. But at the end of the day, what truly matters are the jokes. And in a lot of ways, this film delivers on that end.
Dave, I have a question for you.
Yes, of course, Supreme Leader.
So, how did you get Harrison Ford to admit that he masturbates 17 times a day?
I thought that was great. Now, obviously, it is a dumb, schlocky movie, satirical dark comedy, and during its time, and this is one of the criticisms that I can understand but don't necessarily relate to, the criticism in regards to this movie when it first came out is that, oh, it's a very much a bro comedy movie. And yeah, I mean, you can definitely say that. I mean, there are times in which Seth Rogen and James Franco do the Asian accent, such as Miso Sali when he gets the call from the North Korean government.
Office regarding an interview.
Look, Dave, is this you? Because if it is, you're doing a terrible Asian accent. Me so sorry. Me got to go now, son.
Also, when James Franco uses the Asian accent when he's talking to Seth Rogen, to Aaron Rappaport, as well as when he touches down to North Korea with Konnichiwa.
Kim is a super fan. He knows I take fashion risks. Look, I show up with that other bag, Kim's gonna be like, oh no, you got an ugly bag? You know Skylark, you secret agent. Terminated. Konnichiwa.
Yeah, there are Asian accents in this movie, and I can understand why a more sort of contemporary film critic may not enjoy it. But they go as far as to making fun of not just American culture, but other cultures as well in this movie. I mean, there's a joke in which James Franco or Aaron Skylark explicitly tells Kim Jong-un not to shake Aaron Rappaport's hand because he's a Jew.
Don't shake that hand.
Why not?
Yeah, why not?
Because Aaron's a Jew. Oh, gross.
You know, again, it's a joke, but I think it works well within the context of this movie. So I can understand the criticism of the sort of bro-y aspects of the movie, but when it comes to a comedy movie, what matters are the jokes, and if there are jokes that are funny, then that's all that matters. Yeah, this movie is endlessly quotable. I mean, hate us because they ain't us is definitely a quote that originated from this movie.
Fuckers hate us because they ain't us.
Exactly. They hate us because they ain't us.
Hate us because they ain't us.
They hate us because they ain't us.
He does not have a butthole. He does not need one.
Does he have a butthole?
He does not have a butthole.
This film knows what it's trying to be. But at the same time, the criticisms of all governments in general, I think, still lands true in today's case. Now, when you watch this movie, you had to watch it streaming. When it first came out, you had to watch it streaming. But I feel like if this reached the theaters like it was intended to be, this movie would have easily cleared $500 million in the box office, worldwide box office. Because I think that the themes in this movie are applicable. And even though the target is the North Korean government in this movie, I think there are times in which you'll see governments And you'll see citizens in those same governments that are unhappy with their own government. And I think they can draw comparisons and similarities between what North Korea is doing with what their country is doing, and the governmental overreach that those governments are inflicting upon their own citizens. And I think in a lot of ways, when it comes to the reason as to why I'm discussing this movie a few days before the 4th of July, is because I think it really goes to show you that even though the North Korean government was the main attack point within this movie, there are still times in which you can see shades or remnants of that government within our own governments. And it's important to not just fight against such governments, but to also satirize and make fun of it. So I think that's one of the reasons as to why this movie has had such a staying power. Now, if this movie were to be released in the box office, I do think it would make $500 million because, again, it's a communal experience. These are movies, both horror and comedy movies in general, those specific genre type movies, are movies that are fun to watch with a group of people, where a bunch of strangers can come together and they can laugh and enjoy and have fun. For some reason, comedy movies just make sense, especially those that deal with politically tense moments within American history. I think those movies do really well when it's done in a comedic way. I remember watching Eddington in a packed theater on a Saturday night, and it was amazing. It was hilarious. Ironically enough, both movies are very similar because both feature the song Firework by Katy Perry. So it goes to show you that, there are a lot of similarities. As well as I Love Boosters. I remember watching I Love Boosters, the Boots Riley film, the comedy movie that is made by Boots Riley, thinking, this is amazing to be watching this in a packed theater. Now, granted, it didn't make its money back in the box office, but it's great to watch in a packed theater because it really elevates the jokes, the tension, the humor within that movie. By the way, I discussed both of those movies on the podcast, so please check it out. But yes, I would say that comedy movies are definitely the best movies to watch in the theater. Now, we mentioned the Sony hack, and that definitely did play a role as to why the movie was not released in theaters. But again, when you watch this movie and when you look at the entire movie in general, yes, there are times where it's easy to criticize it. Obviously, we mentioned the sort of like dude bro heavy aesthetics of it, and that could be played to its own detriment. But also, there are criticisms that I did have with this movie. And again, it's very easy to nitpick. So yes, even though these are my criticisms, it doesn't affect my overall enjoyment of the movie. I would say that the main criticism that I have with this movie is that when it comes to the first act and the third act, it's very well established, right? You see Dave Skylark and Aaron Rappaport try to go to North Korea, have a show that's successful, and try to attempt to understand what the CIA is trying to do in terms of getting the resident strip to handshake Kim Jong-un. That makes sense. Third act, that also makes sense. They are trying to create the interview, get the interview, and essentially murder Kim Jong-un. But then there's this whole second act where, while there are moments of it where I can remember, it's rather forgotten in terms of the minutia of those scenes. And there's a whole chunk of that middle part of that movie where you're watching it, and yeah, there are jokes in it, and it is entertaining, but the movie does not know what to do with itself when it gets to that point. And this is something that I see a lot with comedy movies, is that they try and stat pad with jokes, that in the middle, there is room where it could be a little bit better in terms of creating memorable scenes and moments that sort of add to the context of the movie. So that would be my only big critique of the movie, is the sort of middle part, the middle chunk of the movie. But generally speaking, I think that this movie still holds up really well. And part of the reason as to why it holds up really well is because there are moments in which entertainers still fight that same moral question today, where there are times in which comedians will, and this is not to diss anybody, not to go after any comedians, but there are times in which comedians will be explicitly told to perform in front of a government for a boatload of cash. And it is up to the comedian as to whether or not they should perform in front of said government while also whitewashing and sanewashing that government that they're performing in front of, or if they should shed a light on it and not just make fun of said government, but also say no to when that opportunity arises. I'm looking at all the comedians that performed at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, by the way.
Well, there's a Riyadh Comedy Festival. I don't know if you heard about that. This is true. There's a Riyadh, Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival. I mean, how do you even promote that? You know, like, from the folks that brought you 9/11, 2 weeks of laughter in the desert. Don't miss it. I mean, the same guy that's going to pay them is the same guy that paid that guy to bonesaw Jamal Khashoggi and put him in a fucking suitcase. But don't let that stop the yucks. It's going to be a good time.
I think that there are shades in which we can see entertainers today try and tackle that moral responsibility. You know, we even saw that a few years ago when the Manosphere decided to interview people within Trump's cabinet. You know, again, this is something that is a question that will forever be asked, not just today, not just back in 2014, but for the rest of time. And it's up to us as comedians, as artists, to grapple with that moral responsibility as to whether or not we should platform said power, whether we should make fun of said power, or if we should just completely avoid said power in general. And I think that this movie was really able to tackle all those questions just a few years before it really came into fruition. So yeah, I think that this movie is well done. It's solidly made. It is not Raging Bull, you know, it is not a movie of that nature, of that level, but it is a fun movie to watch.
I remember Obama coming on, and he said it after it had been pulled from theaters, sadly, but he's like, no, it should be shown in theaters. We should not be intimidated. And this is a fun movie. You know, I love Seth Rogen, and I love James Flacco.
I think it says something interesting about North Korea that they decided to have the state mount an all-out assault on a movie studio because of a satirical movie starring Seth Rogen and James Flacco.
And it is a movie that you can easily watch in the background, and if you watch it enough times, like myself, you will peer in periodically and remember, hey, I remember when Aaron Skylark got his dog from Kim Jong-un. I remember when Aaron Skylark and Kim Jong-un decided to play basketball and then bang women and people from North Korea, and they're a whole montage of them popping bottles while doing it. And when it comes to performances, I didn't even mention the performances in this movie. I've been on a bender in terms of the hidden meanings of this movie and what it's meant and so many hacks and stuff like that. I completely forgot the performances of this movie. Yes, Seth Rogen and James Franco, they do well, but the best performance in this entire movie was certainly not James Franco, wasn't Seth Rogen. It was Randall Park. He made the movie. Without him as Kim Jong-un, without him realizing the hilariousness of Kim Jong-un, but also the darkness within that supreme leader, this film falls flat on its face. And he is able to really embrace the absurdity of that character to the best of his extent. And a lot of comedy actors would falter in that case, but Randall Park is the exception. And I think you got to give Randall Park his flowers when it comes to his performance in this movie. Again, I know he's South Korean, not North Korean, but still, there's still a lot of overlap between those two cultures, and I think he did the best with what he was given. And again, we're dealing with a bunch of script writers and people that work with Judd Apatow, so they know how to make these characters funny when given a situation that is very dark and disorderly. So yeah, that is also a really, really good moment within the movie. So yes, there are times where it's easy to nitpick, and there are times where it's easy to criticize the movie. I mean, when Dave Skylark has a bulletproof vest, you're just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He definitely would have a bulletproof vest in a surround sound interview.
Bulletproof vest. Got a bulletproof vest on. I don't know how he got it, but he's got it on.
In an interview that is Charlie Rose style. Yes, as we know, Charlie Rose during his interviews would wear bulletproof vest when he would interview Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison. Like what? What? But again, you deal with it and you try and make grasp of it. So yes, overall, those are my thoughts on the movie. It is a funny movie. It still holds up, and I think there are times in which we can see entertainers, performers, comedians also grapple with that same question as to whether or not they should platform said individuals that work with corrupt governments, or they should make fun of it from afar. And I feel like this movie handled that well, but in a healthy way. And yeah, I mean, kudos to Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. This wouldn't be Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg's only work. Obviously, Seth Rogen, James Franco, Evan Goldberg would continue to work, not just with Sausage Party, but with also the award-winning film The Disaster Artist, which was a film that satirized and sort of documented the makings of the 2003 cult classic film The Room.
I used to know a girl, she had a dozen guys. One of them found out about it, beat her up so bad she ended up at a hospital on Guerrero Street.
What a story, Mark.
But I do think that this film is able to handle all of those elements, but in a very much a funny way. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the movie. What a nostalgic movie this was, right? Well, as soon as I talk about this movie, I'm immediately transported to 2014. And I'm immediately transported to a time in which, yes, there were issues within the American government, and there were issues within this world in general, but it felt a lot more measured down, tapered down. And maybe it's just because I was a little younger than I am now, but it felt like these issues weren't as big as they were back in 2014. In fact, Barack Obama was asked about this movie in a White House presser, to which Barack Obama responded by saying Seth Rogen and James Flacco. So it is crazy to think about it in retrospect. But yeah. Anyways, those are my thoughts on this movie, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it was fun, engaging, informative. If you have any other questions or comments in relation to this movie, feel free to leave them down below. I don't have a book recommendation for you guys this week. I've been a little bit slacking in terms of reading. It's been a few great days, weeks where the summer's been out and the sun's been out, and I just haven't really had that much of an interest to read with just how great the weather is. It's important to touch grass every now and then. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon, and I'll probably talk about a new movie next week. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's a guest. Who knows? Anyways, that's been our discussion. Hopefully it was fun for you guys to watch. It's fun to have a blast from the past. Anyways, that's been it for me. Bye.
Skylarkers! Skywalkers! No, hold on. Skywalkers!